Hello, comic nerds. We're going to be grading Amazing Spider-Man 62 today. Now, this is just an amazing cover. I've recently been trying to build up my collection of Silver Age books. I had gotten rid of some a few years ago. I had collected a few as a kid. I just wanted to basically fill in those gaps again in my collection. I wasn't looking for anything over book 50, but I saw this one available at a really good price, a mid-grade copy, and I just had to pick it up just because I love this cover. That's Jazzy John Romita, pretty much at his best. So what we'll do is we'll use our grading tool that I came up with. I'll put a link in the description and above as well if you want to check that out. It's an Excel sheet that you can basically just plug in visually your visual evaluation of different areas of the books that you're grading, and it will spit out a grade for you. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. Now this is a mid-grade copy. It has some flaws that are obvious and some defects, but I think this book can be improved a lot by a clean and press. There is some soiling just kind of all over it. Now there are some color breaks here on the cover as well, so obviously that's going to hold the book back a little bit. So let's just go ahead and get started. The first thing I always look at is bindery issues. We'll look at the corners, see if there's any tears from when it was printed. On older books that have some wear on it, normally that's not a huge thing that you're going to find, although it is possible. You know, there's some other bindery issues that can be, you know, off center, you know, that type of thing. But I'm not seeing anything like that on this book, so we're going to leave it blank here on our sheet. Now what I do here is I just enter the values on this printable sheet. I also give away a printable sheet of this as well, so you guys can evaluate your comics in a different spot than instead of having to sit in front of your computer or have a phone in your hand or whatever. So you can mark your sheet, you can grade, you know, however many copies or ever many comics you want to, and then you can go to your computer and do the calculations on, you know, online without having to have the books out in maybe a hazardous area or whatever. So first thing we look at is the bindery. Now we didn't find anything there. So, you know, there's 7 things we look for here, and the next thing is the corners. Now, this book actually has really good corners for a Silver Age book. You can see some slight little blunting there. And the top and bottom of the spine they're pretty much, they're dinged pretty good. So it's definitely not, you know, it's not nothing, so we're going to have to allow for that. And on the back we have a little chip out of, we're going to call that more the edge than the corner. We'll just keep that separate because that's a separate category, but the edges look pretty much the same on the back as they do on the front. So we just have a grading scale here. It's negligible, tiny, minor, moderate, extensive, or major. Well, just be reasonable with it. Is it minor? Well, it's not major, but it's probably a little worse than minor, right? Is it extensive? Well, I wouldn't say that's extensive. Is it moderate? Okay, yeah. So that's what I'm going to go with. We're going to go with moderate on the corners. There's some blunting there, but it's not excessive, and it's not like a huge deal breaker on this book. You're not going to look at it and say, oh, I'm not going to buy this book because of the corners, you know. So that's kind of what that moderate category kind of does for you. Moderate's going to be a pretty common thing that we select on books of this age that are of good quality, you know, mid-grade type books. So the next thing we look at is the edges. We just run our finger along the edge. I can feel some slight pitting there. Yeah, it's hard to see because it's, you know, it's the Marvel edge of books anyway, especially on this right side you'll see it. Although this one is exceptionally good, I think. Yeah, this is not bad at all. So from what I can see, let me look at some magnification here real quick. This edge is actually really nice. I would say this has some minor stuff, but nothing, I'm not even a moderate yet on it. But as we remember, we looked at this, there's a little chip out of this edge here. So that's going to automatically take us to moderate. So if there's a big accumulation of a bunch of those, we would get to extensive pretty fast. But there's a couple little small tears here on the top. And maybe a couple little dings here. There's one here. Okay, so I mean, I don't think there's enough to get us to extensive, so we're going to go with moderate on the edges as well. And if you're using a pen near your comics, keep a little buffer zone between, and always set the pen down before you pick a comic up. I haven't actually marked any of my comics, but I've caught myself getting way too close to them, and you might see that and have seen that in past videos. So now let's look at the spine, and always keep a board under your comics when you're evaluating them. Just, it's not worth the risk of, you know, holding it here and having it bend over. We don't want to do any more damage than is already there, right? So we look up and down the spine. There's a few color breaking ticks here in the yellow part. They're not terrible, but they're there. And luckily this is kind of a white cover. So there's a bunch of ticks here, but I think a lot of that would be cleaned up. If this is cleaned and pressed, I think this might all go away right here, or it might be so light that you might not even be able to see it. So, but I think as it sits right now, because it's a white cover, I think if this was a darker cover, there would be a huge amount of color breaks here. But because this is a lighter color, and you know, I'm not going to get beyond moderate, I don't think, on this spine. There might be some debate on that, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 15 or so pretty sizable ticks here, but since it's white, it doesn't really break color. So I would say this is somewhere on the high end of moderate. So what I would do in that case is I'll put moderate, but then I'll just also make it minor as well. Just add in a few points there, just to get us above just standard moderate or whatever. So now let's look at the staples. I think the staples are very good on this book. It seems like it's a very tight book. And there's some soiling around the staples, but I'm not seeing, maybe a slight discoloration in staples, but yeah, I can see a good shine on them still. They look pretty good, and they're firmly on the book. I do see one little stress line there. That's minor. So let's just open it up to, what is it, page 11, 12, 13, 14, something like that, and look at the inside of staples. I will not be opening it more than once like this. Okay, here we are. Yeah, page 12 and 13. Original staples. They've held up really well. There's some slight discoloration, but they look good. They're nice, and this book is still got some, you know, it's still tight. It still opens and doesn't lay completely flat when it's open, so that's a good sign. This book has been well taken care of. Probably was picked up by a collector in the 70s or something like that, and just kept nice since. So I would say minor. I would say tiny on the staples, just because there's some discoloration there. Okay, so let's look at the cover. So we know there's some soiling, and I think that a lot of that will clean off on the front and back. But just from the soiling by itself, I would put us at moderate. And we have a color break here. We have a crease here that doesn't really break color too bad, and I think that crease will clean up there with a clean and a press. There's some slight rub. There's a slight rub up here in the Amazing, if you can see that. There's some creasing here, very minor. Now if you'll look here, there's like a color break almost right across her chin right here. Now when I first got this book, I was disappointed. I was like, oh, you know, there's a crease right there. But I don't think that was a crease. Now, the reason I say that is because I've seen several books for sale that had that on it. So I think that's a printing flaw from original, from when it was first published. So I saw an 8.0 book that had that on it, exactly in the same spot. So I'm going to discount that slightly, but I think based on the overall look of this book, I don't think it would. I mean, it does suck that it's right across her, kind of her chin there, but I don't think that's going to hold us back. I don't think that's going to get us from, say, you know, moderate to extensive or whatever. But just based on what I'm seeing here, let's just make sure. Oh yeah, there's a slight little, there's something here. I don't know what that is. It's like a crust or something. That might clean off. I don't think that's a stain. Somebody dropped something on there. Maybe some food. Who knows? So I'll leave that as a question mark, but it's definitely there. And it might leave a stain once it was cleaned off. So I think we're beyond moderate here. I think But look, I mean, the book, if you just look at it, it has a good appeal to it still. You know, I don't think I would be ashamed to have this on my wall, right? If it was slabbed. So yeah, I'm thinking, this is a tougher one for me because it definitely has some things going for it and it has some things going against it. I'm going to say moderate, but on the higher end of moderate. Like not quite extensive, but maybe we'll do this here and just we're not going to get up to the number of points we would with extensive, but it's definitely beyond that. Now after clean and press, I think we could get it down to just moderate or somewhere between minor and moderate. It just depends on how well this book cleans up. There's a slight little stain here too, so we're probably always going to be moderate on this book, but I think this will be a really attractive book, even more so after a clean and press. But I'm actually going to do that. I think I'll send this one off for that. I'm curious to see what happens. And for the pages, not bad. Off-white. Yeah, these pages look good. Slightly off-white. There's and it's pretty evenly. There's no like huge. It wasn't in the sun at any point, I don't think. So it's just like normal aging. Let's just make sure there's no coupon missing or anything. Check all the pertinent areas here. I've already kind of went through this book a little bit, so I don't want to overdo it here. So I would say we're not even minor on the pages. The pages are really good on this book, and the chipping doesn't go into the pages on the back there. So I'm just going to say tiny on the pages here. So yeah, so if I had to give this an overall rating, I would say there's no way it's getting 7.0. 6.5 is probably a stretch on this book as well. But I think it might be right now a 4.5 or 5.0. I think this is a solid 5.0 right now as it sits. I think we could achieve 6 potentially with a clean and a press. So I'm going to say 5.0 with 6.0 after press. And if it cleaned like beautifully up, we could possibly have an outside chance of 6.5, assuming this is just a normal thing on this book. So, but I would be happy with a 6.0 in this for this book. So this is a nice cover, and I might sell it if I could find a higher grade copy. But I think if I could get a 5.5 or 6.0, I'd be happy with that until I could find a suitable replacement. I'm never in a rush to replace comics. I just kind of take my time and find good deals. So yeah, so what we'll do now is we'll switch over to the computer and we'll plug in these values and we'll see what we come up with. Okay, so if you look right here, we've got our Google Sheet that I created with a points-based system. So what we'll do is we'll just start ticking the boxes based on how we evaluated this comic when we just graded it. So let's look at the corners. First thing, well obviously bindery I didn't put anything. You know, there could be something on there that I just didn't see, but I'm just going to go with what I know now and just leave that one blank. For corners, we had moderate. There was quite a bit of blunting on the spine corners, and there was definitely a tiny bit of blunting on the other corners. So edges, we had as moderate. Now we did have a little slight piece missing from that edge. I don't think it gets us too extensive, but I could see somebody evaluating that way, but it is on the back of the cover. I think the overall appeal of the edges is still fine, so I don't think we're going to get too extensive on that. Spine, I had it as somewhere between moderate and extensive. This is a hard one for me because I know, yeah, I think I'm going to stick with that. I think we could be even more than that. Now that I'm looking the way the points are added up, I'm thinking we got to use some common sense here. I think so. Moderate gets us to 28. Extensive gets us to 28. Moderate gets us to 24, 25, 26. I think that's reasonable. We'll just stick with that. For the staples, we had tiny, and actually, I think I missed. There was a couple little small creases coming off of that. I can't find my pen to correct this. I'm going to correct the sheet here. It's actually, I just realized I did that wrong. That should not be tiny on the staples. Tiny would be, you can hardly see anything. And those staples are definitely not perfect. There's some discoloration, and there's one or two little small creases coming off of it. So that's definitely more of a minor thing. So I'm going to change that to minor. That's why doing this process, having layers to this process is so good, because now I can reality check when I'm sitting here. I'm looking at the picture, I'm remembering what I saw, because I was just up there a couple minutes ago doing it. And I just misinterpreted that staple. I have instructions over here on the right that I kind of reread to keep myself on course for this, and that'll be available on this sheet as well. And minor is obvious, but very minor, and does not significantly detract. Tiny is can barely see, but it's obvious with magnification. Well, I could see that without magnification very well. So I've just got to stick with minor on that. Okay, so that correction's been made. For the cover, I had it somewhere between, I had moderate, but more on the extensive side. I mean, almost extensive. So I'm going to go with that and just say that's what it is, because it's got some pretty, not heavy soiling, but there pretty much isn't a spot on this book that doesn't have some light, dark, I don't know, dust, dirt, whatever you want to call it. It looks like a significant amount of cleaning could be done to this book. So that's why, I mean, I could almost just tick excessive there. I mean, extensive. Yeah. Well, I think it doesn't matter. We're pretty much at the same spot anyway. So I'm going to stick with what my original gut on that. So these borderline books, that's where you kind of have problems. Is this extensive or moderate? Is this extensive or major? I mean, there's some gray area here, but we'll just stick with being reasonable and logical with it. So as for the pages, they were off-white. I didn't really see any issues as far as tears or anything like that. Everything was pretty solid on the inside. I think tiny is a pretty good assessment there. I could see somebody going with minor, but I'm going to stick with tiny on that. And as you can see, we're just getting to the 5.5. Now, my assessment of it was a 5.0 book, so I'm still within that range of what I thought it would be. Usually if I assess a book 5.0, I expect it to come in a 4.5 to a 5.5. So I'm on the higher end. And, you know, obviously we didn't do like a super thorough look at this book. This was kind of just a quick little look over. So we like to err on the side of caution. So I would still probably call this book a 5.0. But, you know, I would err on my eyes being more accurate than this little app I made. This is more of just kind of an affirmation type thing, and a ballpark grades if you're just not sure, and to just make sure you're not completely off. Like if I put it in here and it was showing me as a 3.0, I'd be like, what did I do? I know that I did something wrong, and I would go back and I would regrade this book visually. I would start the whole process over if I was like a huge disparity. If I'm more than 1.0 off or more than 2 points off, I start thinking something ain't right. Because I've evaluated over 100 books. I'd say over my last 100 books using this tool, I have not been more than 2 points off. Like if I'm a 5.0, it's never going to be more than 6 or less than 4. And the vast majority of the time, I'm either spot on with it or I'm like 1 grade level off. So I'm pretty confident that, you know, and I haven't seen a big disparity like that. I'm just saying if I did see that, I would take that into account and revisit the entire book. So yeah, so 5.5, I think that's pretty solid. I think what we should do now is think about this book after press. So let's use this right-hand side here and just let's re-enter all these values and think about what we might be able to improve with a press and a clean. Can we touch the corners? I mean, corners can clean up a little bit, but there's really no like creasing in the corners, so there's really nothing we can do there. Can we clean up the edges? Well, no. Edges, we got some pitting, we got some discoloration on the edges, we got a piece missing from the book. There's nothing we can do about that, right? And actually, why am I at 6.0 here? I must have misclicked something. Yeah, okay. So the spine, yeah, now we can improve the spine. Cleaning and maybe eliminating all of those white ticks on there and only having 3 or 4 color breaks on it, that could be a significant improvement on this book. In fact, that could almost get us to minor. I think that could get us between minor and moderate. So what I would do is go like this. And what about staples? Can we improve that? No, not really. There's nothing we can do about the staples. The staples are going to be what they are. We're not going to get rid of that tiny little crease either, really, on staples. I don't think so anyway. How about the cover? Now this is a spot we can definitely improve. A lot of this going toward extensive was mainly because of the soiling. Now if we just had the color breaks in the cover, where would we be? Honestly. It's not going to be, let's go ahead and just erase everything here. It's not going to be tiny. It's not going to be minor. It's going to be beyond minor. I would just say moderate. I think that's where we're going to be. Pretty safely just say moderate. It's not extensive. It's not minor. It's moderate. How about the pages? Nah, there's nothing we can do about that. So I think the potential on this book is 6.5. I really, honestly, just don't think this would ever be a 7.0 book. There's just too much color breaking. There's too much discoloration. Some of it's in the wrong spots too. It's like detracting from the book too much. So I would never give this book a 7.0. But I think if the cleaning happens like I think it could on this book, I think a 6.5 is definitely possible. So I'm going to go with my 5.0 with a possible 6.5. So there's just some room here for a definite bump, I think. So this is definitely one that we would want to clean and press. But I think the range, though, after clean and press, just depends on how well they do it, is somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5. I still think 6.5 might be slightly on the high end. So I would say there's probably a 50% chance it's a 6.0, and maybe a 25% chance of a 5.5 and a 25% chance of a 6.5. If I had to just guess, that's what I would think. So we're going to go and stick with that 5.0 with a 6.5 after clean and press potential and see what happens. So I'm going to put this in my Silver Age submission that I'm going to do, and I think I've got 20 of them or something like that. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.